Module 7, Audiovisual Translation, Subtitling. In this and the next module, we explore elements of audiovisual translation. And this module focuses on subtitles, while the next one will focus on dubbing. Throughout this lecture, I will discuss both conceptual and industrial issues related to media translation, and I will show visual examples to illustrate these issues. Please make sure that you open the lecture script, if you keep it here open as you watch the video that I will post on YouTube. But please make sure that you open the lecture script while you are watching this video, as I will ask you to stop at different points to watch examples of what I am discussing. So for example, if you go here, I will ask you to watch a documentary once we get to slide 11, and that is about 20 minutes or so, but it's a little bit more interactive, this module, so I do need you to watch visual examples of what I am discussing, and I will let you know when you have to stop. So first off, I want to start by locating audiovisual translation within some recurrent critiques. Norns, the author of one of the two articles, one of the two readings, you can choose between the article by Norns, or you can choose my book. I assign one of the chapters in my book, the introductory chapter. So it's either Norns reading or my chapter for the reading report, but you should really read them both to understand this presentation. So Norns talks about the death of a text when discussing translation. And the death of a text through translation is an age-old trope, but it takes on new meaning with its transposition into cinema. As in the case of literature, the death is a discursive condition, but with film, it also constitutes a perceptual category. So spectators often find cinema's powerful sense of mimesis muddied by subtitles, even by skillful ones. What Norns means here is that subtitles distract from the visuals. And I'm going back to Norns' quote, and dubbing is simply beyond the pale. The original foreign object, its sights and its sounds, is available to all, but it is easily obscured by the graphic text or disconnected speech through which we necessarily approach it. Thus, the opacity of awkwardness of film translation easily inspires rage. So this is the way Norns describe the kind of, not just critique, but actual rage and disgust that has usually interested audiovisual translation. The problem with audiovisual translation is an interesting and a paradoxical one, since everyone accepts translation in literature unless they're very poorly done. So the skepticism against translation is specific to media and visual text. As a consequence of this disgust towards audiovisual translation, little attention is dedicated academically to this topic. Norns again explains this phenomenon. I began to wonder why so little attention is paid to the work of film translators. The reasons are multiple and ultimately have to do with the more generalized devaluation of translation, but one that is the industry itself has historically discounted their contribution. So few translators get credit for their essential work, and they generally receive no residuals, a clear indication that their authorship goes unrecognized. The same is often true for voice actors who apply their specialized skills for dubbing. But it is impossible to fathom a film world without all these translators toiling away in the background. What on earth would it be like? In sum, a major premise is that moving image media was unevenly globalized from the start, and this was only possible thanks to tens of thousands of anonymous translators. It's funny that so few have noticed. What Norns is arguing here is that whether we like subtitles and dubbing or not, they are the practices that make international distribution possible, as we should not assume that audiences worldwide speak English, in the case of Hollywood media exports, or endless languages, in the case of international products. And you can read an article here about a protest that happened in India among dubbing actors that speak a specific language within India, which is Canada. So I put a link to in your script, and you should check it out. Generally speaking, the necessity for audiovisual translation became evident only with the coming of sound in the late 1920s, when the talking picture became the prisoner of its own language. Most European countries, moved by nationalistic pride and the flow of English language films, decided to introduce precise protectionist measures in order both to preserve national production and also to ensure translations of the films in their own language. So what happened is that all of a sudden film does not speak a universal language. What happens is that film does not speak a universal language anymore after the coming of sound. It was easy to translate intertitles, as you can see in this picture. Intertitles just took very quick translation, but translating an entire film with the coming of sound, that became much more complicated. This process started with The Jazz Singer. The Jazz Singer is a 1927 American musical film, and it was the first feature-length motion picture with synchronized dialogue sequences. Its release heralded the commercial ascendance of the talkies and the decline of the silent film era. As a consequence of the coming of sound, a series of solutions were found to make Hollywood films available in other countries. One of these solutions was the multi-language versions. They were popular mainly between 1929 and 1933. This solution involved reshooting the entire original film with actors fluent in the relevant language, directors, writers, and of course, it's pretty obvious that this solution became very quickly too expensive to be sustainable. A second solution was subtitling, which means that written text is added to the original film. The final solution is dubbing, which inserts a new soundtrack offering a synchronized translation of the original dialogue. The original preference of most countries in the original choice between dubbing and subtitling after the coming of sound has typically remained the same to this day. The choice of dubbing versus subtitling was usually historical. For example, in Italy, Mussolini prohibited the screening of any films that were not completely spoken in Italian, therefore dubbing was the only option. The choice also presents some ideological aspects. Wealthiest country tends to choose dubbing over subtitling because even if it's more expensive, it allows for more possibilities for national identity to be inserted in the text. But what's more important to consider is that Hollywood studios' concern over methods of translation after the coming of sound was justified by a number of factors. First of all, the profits from the foreign market was between 35 and 40% of a studio's total profits in 1929. So that was definitely a market that American film studios did not want to lose. Then one major element in the box office appeal was that the audience's familiarity with certain narrative patterns helped audiences understand. So studios moved to formulas and genre conventions to create stories that audiences would be familiar with. And finally, there was an element of diversity, and American film studios understood that linguistic differences corresponded to cultural, national, and ethnic differences. So if we continue with the discussion about diversity and how dubbing allows for elements of national identity to be inserted, I'd like to discuss how translation is as much about erasing the foreign as it is about including it. Translation, seen in this perspective, also shifts the analysis from a production-centric point of view to a reception-centric point of view, and recontextualizes the study of globalization from the perspective of the American producers to that of the international audiences decoding these programs. This new point of view provides significant indicators of how globalization and international media flows cannot exclusively be examined as absolute practices of ideological and economic domination. And this is the point where I would like you to stop and watch at this documentary about the practice of subtitling and all the problems that many practitioners have to go through. So you can stop the video, go to your script, click on the link for the documentary, and continue this presentation after you've seen the documentary. As with most other kinds of writing, the democratization of subtitle publishing has driven down rates for the most low-margin work, mainly subtitling for DVDs, and that's part of what the documentary discusses. Canadian film translator Robert Gray was recently approached by a company that wanted him to subtitle 30 films a month, a frantic pace of work, clearly. They were paying 10 cents a subtitle, Gray says. Anyone taking time and doing it seriously wouldn't do it for less than $1 or $1.50 per subtitle. So what's interesting to note also is that subtitles are the only form of translation where the audience can compare the translation with the original. So a bad job can be spotted right away if the audience can understand the original language. And you can read more about this article on your script. Now, issues of audiovisual translation are also ideological in nature. Less known languages are rarely translated directly, so there is a greater chance to lose the original intent of the artist. An example is the film Rebel, or War Witch in its English title. Rebel is about an African child soldier, and much of the dialogue is in Lingala, a Bantu language spoken in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Gray doesn't understand Lingala and was given a raw German translation based not on the original dialogue, but on a transcript of the English subtitles. It was problematic, Gray says. The person who did the translation hadn't seen the film and was translating as if it were a written text. There are often many steps involved in the translation and adaptation of a program, sometimes from its original language to English or French if the language is lesser known. This process clearly allows many domesticated terms to be added by the translating countries and many foreign themes to be erased. Now, I would like to explore now some of the functional uses of subtitles. And specifically, I want you guys to take a look at a clip that I posted in the script from Men on Fire, a movie by Tony Scott that came out in 2004. So watch the clip and then I will continue. As you can notice, the subtitles are not confined to the top layer of the film. They have depth and perception. They fade in, fade out, appear abruptly, are covered by the actor's movements, and increase or decrease based on the seriousness of the conversation and the tone of the actor's voice. They wait for their turn, and they, like the real-life actors, hit their mark as told. Other times, subtitles are used in a very self-referential fashion, and the point of a film or TV show becomes precisely that of playing with subtitles, their function, and their intrusive nature. Here you can see an example from a sort of funny subtitles comedy on the left, and then an example from Austin Powers. So please take a look at both clips to see examples of self-referential subtitles. Now, I want to clarify the difference between closed captioning and subtitles. Captioning is text that appears on a video which contains dialogue and audio cues such as music or sound effects that occur off-screen. The purpose of captioning is to make video content accessible to those who cannot access the audio content of the video, such as for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and for other situations in which the audio cannot be heard due to environmental noise or a need for silence. You can read more from the FCC website about closed captioning for TV and for the internet in the links that I posted on your script. Closed captions are transmitted as a special coded signal sent along with the video picture and require a decoder in your television or cable box to see them. Most TVs and cable boxes have a decoder built in now. This special signal is what broadcasters check for to ensure that your video is in accordance with the law. These are both examples of closed captioning. The top one on the internet, on YouTube, and the bottom on TV. Subtitles sometimes are burned into the video so they can be turned off. This is called burned-in subtitles or hard subtitles, and is used when the subtitles must always be available, such as when translating foreign language dialogue for an audience that is assumed doesn't understand that language. Some formats, such as a DVD, Blu-ray, or many web-based players, and a few other video formats, can contain one or more tracks of subtitles which can be selected and turned on or off by the player. This is called soft subtitles or separate subtitles. So this presentation hopefully has clarified some ideas about audiovisual translation and all the possibilities it offers. We will discuss dubbing in more depth in the next module, but I want to introduce some of the critiques against dubbing and challenge them in the next module, in fact. Film critic Bosley Crowther noted how dubbing allowed viewers to concentrate on the visual aspects of performance and celebrated dubbing's liberation of the eye from the edge of the frame. He suggested that subtitles turned the mass of Americans away from films they would otherwise flock to, and dismissed many advocates of subtitling as elitist. And he argued that one reason people dislike dubbing is that they've never seen a masterful one. Now, Italy has been praised for the best dubbing schools in the world, and having grown up watching dubbed film and television, dubbing has really never bothered me until recently, when I have become used to watching films in the original language. But some of the critiques, however, include, in terms of subtitling, it is calculated that only 40% of the text can be translated. They distract from the visual, and they're often associated with elitist and intellectual foreign films. Dubbing, however, is considered better than subtitling, but still allows only 70% of the text to be translated. It breaks the sense of abandonment of the viewers. It sounds awkward, especially when out of sync and not done professionally, and it completely erases the original text. Now, we will see in the next module what this complete erasure of the original text implies in terms of ideology, in terms of culture. So we will explore dubbing in the next module.